Welcome to True Crime Threads, where we explore the darkest corners of real-life crime. Today, we uncover the chilling story of a mother who poisoned her daughter for fame and fortune. Laura appeared to be everything a mother should be. To the outside world, she was a tireless caregiver, an embodiment of strength and compassion who lived solely for her daughter, Alyssa. In their quiet suburban neighborhood, Laura's dedication to Alyssa had become almost legendary. Friends, family, and neighbors watched as she tended to her daughter's needs with what seemed like endless patience and determination. People would often comment on how hard it must be to care for a sick child, but Laura would only sigh and offer a brave smile, saying she would do anything to give Alyssa a chance at life. Her words and expressions conveyed a mother's endless love and sacrifice, a sentiment that resonated deeply with everyone around her. But it wasn't only her community that noticed. Laura had a growing presence on social media, where she shared her journey as a devoted mother of a child with a rare and supposedly deadly illness. The online world quickly took to her story, and within a few months, Laura had garnered thousands of followers. She posted updates from hospital rooms, sharing images of Alyssa looking pale and weak, wrapped in blankets, her tiny hand clutching her mother's. Each post was filled with stories of their battles and small victories, with Laura's emotional reflections tugging at the heartstrings of her audience. She described the sleepless nights, the endless doctor appointments, and the heartbreak of watching her child suffer. Laura's following continued to grow, with strangers across the world touched by her seemingly selfless devotion. Some donated to her cause, while others offered words of support and sympathy. Each day, messages poured in from people who followed her story closely, praying for Alyssa's recovery and marveling at Laura's strength. But behind the carefully crafted image of a perfect, loving mother was a hidden agenda that no one could have suspected. Laura was not only savoring the sympathy and support she received, she was beginning to crave it. Every message of encouragement, every donation, and every like fed something within her, fueling her ambition to become an icon of resilience. Her online followers had no way of knowing that the suffering of her daughter had become the foundation of Laura's fame. Each post was carefully curated to draw maximum sympathy, and each dollar donated further validated her efforts. The story she had constructed was perfect, with herself as the brave mother standing by her child against insurmountable odds. As people fell deeper under her spell, Laura found herself going to increasingly extreme lengths to maintain the tragic narrative. With each new post, the persona of the perfect mother she had created began to diverge further from the reality she carefully kept hidden. As Alyssa's illness worsened, Laura's social media posts took a darker and more urgent tone. Her followers watched with concern as she described a seemingly endless parade of new symptoms: persistent fevers, crippling fatigue, constant nausea, and unexplained bruises. Laura claimed that despite countless tests, doctors remained baffled. In her posts, she documented Alyssa's frailty, showing photos of her daughter looking pale, exhausted, and fragile. Each new symptom intensified the emotional weight of her posts, drawing in more followers who empathized with what they saw as an unimaginable journey of suffering. The more Alyssa's health declined, the more people rallied around Laura. Donations continued to pour in, and words of encouragement flooded her inbox. Laura's online presence grew, and with it, her reputation as a mother fighting against insurmountable odds. Behind the scenes, however, her growing desire for attention and sympathy pushed her to do things that even she hadn't imagined at first. She began introducing Alyssa to new medications, often ones that caused temporary side effects she could exploit online. Each bout of illness provided fresh content, a new chapter in her ongoing story. In time, the local medical community began to take notice as well. Alyssa had become a frequent visitor to hospitals, with Laura insisting on more and more invasive tests in her search for answers. Yet, no diagnosis could explain Alyssa's symptoms, as every test returned inconclusive results. Frustrated, Laura claimed her daughter's illness was rare and complex, going beyond the understanding of most doctors. Hospital staff grew uneasy. A pediatric specialist, in particular, took note of something unusual every time Alyssa was admitted. She seemed to improve when left alone or under the care of other medical staff. But as soon as Laura reappeared, Alyssa's symptoms mysteriously worsened. One nurse became especially suspicious. She noticed a direct correlation between Alyssa's sudden symptoms and her mother's presence. On one occasion, when Laura left for a few hours, Alyssa's color returned, and she even asked for food. But when Laura came back, Alyssa quickly fell back into a state of lethargy. The nurse documented her observations but hesitated to speak up. After all, Laura had such a spotless reputation, both in the community and online, as a dedicated mother. Accusing her of harming her child would not only be difficult to prove but also risk a public backlash, given Laura's social media influence. Despite her doubts, the nurse couldn't ignore her observations. She knew something was wrong, but she lacked the evidence to make a formal accusation. Meanwhile, Laura continued to play the role of the grieving, devoted mother, oblivious to the suspicion she had stirred. As the nurse wrestled with her concerns, Laura's actions grew bolder, knowing that the worse Alyssa looked, the more sympathy and donations she could attract. As Alyssa's condition seemed to deteriorate further, Laura's desperation to keep her story alive pushed her to extreme measures. Each social media update became more sensational, depicting her as a mother on the brink, struggling to stay afloat under the crushing weight of her daughter's mysterious illness. She wrote in vivid detail about sleepless nights, terrifying symptoms, and the hopelessness that loomed over their lives. Her posts became more dramatic, with photos of her holding Alyssa's limp hand, looking defeated yet somehow resilient, drawing more sympathy from her ever-growing followers. But as Laura's online fame grew, so did the scrutiny. The people closest to her began noticing inconsistencies between her public persona and her private life. Friends who had seen her boasting about her new home renovations or her recent shopping sprees wondered how she could afford such luxuries while supposedly facing such financial hardship. While Laura often claimed donations went to medical expenses, no one had ever seen bills, receipts, or records of the supposed procedures and treatments she described. Her seemingly contradictory lifestyle raised subtle red flags, and the whispers of doubt grew louder, though no one dared confront her directly. Doctors at local hospitals were also starting to feel uneasy. Alyssa's case was perplexing. Every test seemed to return normal, yet Laura insisted that her daughter was suffering from an untraceable illness. Doctors noted that while Alyssa's symptoms were severe, they didn't fit any clear medical pattern. It was almost as if they were being induced rather than arising from any natural condition. But Laura was relentless. When doctors hinted at psychological evaluations or suggested Alyssa's symptoms might be psychosomatic, Laura switched hospitals. She publicly shamed any doctor or hospital that questioned her, accusing them of neglecting her daughter and failing to understand her condition. This tactic effectively silenced any critics, as they were fearful of her social media influence and the backlash it could incite. Undeterred, Laura continued documenting Alyssa's struggle and became increasingly comfortable manipulating her followers. She began devising new symptoms, learning about obscure diseases, and twisting medical terminology to make her posts sound more credible. Online, she gained a reputation as a knowledgeable advocate for rare diseases. Her supporters were eager to believe her story, and those who questioned her intentions were quickly silenced by her loyal followers, who saw Laura as an inspiration. But as the inconsistencies grew, a few close friends and neighbors dared to voice their doubts. Meanwhile, medical staff members who had noticed Alyssa's remarkable recoveries whenever she was away from Laura decided to investigate further. They saw Laura's frequent hospital switches as a means to avoid questions that might expose her deception. Some brave doctors and nurses began quietly reporting their suspicions, hoping that the authorities would step in to investigate what they couldn't say out loud. For now, Laura's carefully constructed life of lies continued to thrive. She was confident that no one would uncover the truth, that her reputation and influence would protect her. Little did she know, her trail of deceit was unraveling, one small clue at a time, as the professionals around her took steps to expose the sinister reality behind her online image. The turning point came when authorities decided they could no longer ignore the strange reports about Alyssa's health. The medical staff, who had been documenting the unusual incidents, finally reached a critical mass of evidence to warrant a formal investigation. After numerous reports of Alyssa's symptoms seeming to vanish whenever she was away from her mother, Child Protective Services and local law enforcement stepped in to examine her case more closely. Investigators reviewed Alyssa's extensive medical records and saw a disturbing pattern. Each symptom Laura claimed her daughter was suffering from had been temporary, with no organic cause identified in any of the medical tests. This alone was suspicious, but there was more. When they searched Laura's home, they made a chilling discovery. In a locked cabinet in her bathroom, they found syringes, pill bottles, and various substances that could induce symptoms of serious illnesses. The chemicals were carefully labeled, some in dosages that would create reactions in line with the symptoms Laura had described online. Toxicology analysis of Alyssa's recent blood work revealed traces of these very substances, which could cause symptoms ranging from dizziness and nausea to weakness and fatigue. This was no accident, it was a deliberate and calculated act. Laura had been systematically poisoning her own daughter, slowly and intentionally, to maintain the fiction of Alyssa's deteriorating health. The investigation uncovered just how methodical Laura had been in constructing her narrative. Each new symptom she induced would prompt her to post tearful updates, lamenting her daughter's condition and the failure of doctors to provide answers. The cycle of manipulation had allowed Laura to build an empire of sympathy. She even kept a notebook, found tucked away in her bedroom, filled with a timeline of symptoms, dosages, and planned social media posts. It was evidence of her calculated approach to creating drama, ensuring each post aligned with Alyssa's latest health crisis. When confronted with the mounting evidence, Laura continued to deny everything. She claimed that the items found were supplements and medications recommended by obscure health specialists online, but her story was quickly dismantled. Investigators found that Laura had been researching symptoms of rare diseases and the effects of certain household poisons, tailoring each dose to mimic the appearance of a legitimate illness. This obsessive attention to detail revealed a chilling intent. Laura had no boundaries when it came to ensuring that Alyssa remained sick in the public eye. The depth of Laura's deception horrified even the most experienced investigators. She had portrayed herself as a suffering, resilient mother to gain sympathy and financial support while causing unimaginable pain to her daughter. As the evidence mounted, Laura's once loyal followers learned the truth. She had orchestrated a story of suffering, risking her daughter's life for fame and financial gain. The community that had once rallied behind her now turned their backs, appalled by the betrayal. With the truth finally exposed, Laura was arrested, leaving Alyssa to begin a slow journey toward recovery, free from her mother's insidious influence. Laura's carefully crafted world came crashing down as media outlets picked up on the horrifying details, exposing her manipulation to a shocked public. Her arrest marked the end of her deception, but the damage was done. Her reputation as the perfect mother was forever shattered, replaced by the harrowing reality of a woman willing to sacrifice her child's well-being for attention and greed. The story would go down as a chilling example of how far some will go for fame, leaving a legacy of trauma in its wake. After Laura's arrest, the details of her scheme gripped the public. News channels, newspapers, and social media all carried the shocking story, dissecting every piece of evidence that revealed the extent of her deception. People who had once admired Laura's resilience now felt betrayed, and her former supporters were left in disbelief. Laura's rise to internet fame had hinged on a fabricated narrative, woven through countless posts filled with fake tears and carefully staged photos, all designed to inspire sympathy and donations. As the truth came out, people struggled to comprehend how a mother could do something so cruel to her own child. The legal proceedings were swift but intense. Prosecutors laid out a detailed case, showing not only the physical harm Laura had inflicted on Alyssa, but also the psychological torment her daughter had endured. Alyssa, now free from her mother's influence, began to recover physically, but her emotional scars were deeper and more complex. She struggled with trust, having spent years under her mother's control, subjected to a relentless cycle of poisoning and feigned love. For Alyssa, the concept of mother was now forever altered. Instead of representing warmth and safety, it had become a symbol of betrayal and suffering. During the trial, it was revealed that Laura had been planning even bigger things. Investigators found early drafts of a memoir she intended to publish, filled with dramatic stories of her struggles and sacrifices as a single mother. The book proposal described the relentless toll of Alyssa's illness on her life, her constant battles with the medical system, and her efforts to raise awareness for rare diseases. Laura had even arranged for professional photos and interviews with local media outlets to boost her image as an advocate. This revelation stunned the courtroom and her former supporters, exposing her long-term ambition to profit even further from her daughter's suffering. The final twist, however, was perhaps the most disturbing. Court documents revealed that Laura had recently reached out to producers about filming a documentary. She wanted to capitalize on her growing online following, believing her story was inspirational. Her pitch was filled with emotional appeals, claiming she wanted to show the world the strength of a mother's love in reality. It was a calculated effort to elevate her own image and create a lasting brand around Alyssa's fabricated illness. This shocking plan was laid bare in court, leaving no doubt about her intentions. Laura received a lengthy prison sentence for child abuse, fraud, and other charges, while Alyssa was placed in the care of extended family. The media's attention gradually shifted away, but the legacy of Laura's actions lingered. Alyssa's journey toward healing was slow and painful, marked by therapy and support from family members who worked tirelessly to help her regain some sense of normalcy. For the community and her online followers, Laura's story became a haunting reminder of the dangers of social media manipulation, where sympathy can be weaponized and fame can corrupt. As Alyssa tried to rebuild her life, she found strength in her survival, a testament to her resilience despite her mother's betrayal. Her story stood as a lesson in courage, warning others to question what they see online and to be vigilant about those who seem too perfect in their suffering. Though she remained haunted by her past, Alyssa began to dream of a future where she could finally be free from her mother's shadow. Laura's name faded from memory over time, remembered only in whispers, a tragic symbol of the lengths some will go to for fame and the devastation they leave in their wake.